Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome. I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. Before her unexpected second act teaching kindergarten in Thailand, my guest was a climate scientist at the National Oceanic and Atmosphere Administration. Her research contributed to the 2007 Nobel Peace Prize winning Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Originally from Massachusetts, she now lives in the Washington, D.C. area, where she teaches English as a second language and yoga. Her writing has appeared in many publications, including the New York Times. She loves crossword puzzles, book clubs, ocean swimming, and the heart of a ripe watermelon on an August afternoon. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Dian Seidel.
Thank you, Julia. Pleasure to be here.
Dian, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, what took you so long to write your first book?
Well, Julia, I actually think it didn't take me so long to write my first book. Yes, I'm over 50. In fact, I'm over 60, and it is my first book. But I never really thought about writing a book seriously until I started writing this book. Of course, as a reader of great literature, I thought, I've always thought, wouldn't it be wonderful someday to write the great American novel? But I never really felt I had a concept or the talent or the time to pursue that. So I never really sat down to write a book until I returned from Thailand, from my experience teaching there. And it turned out that I returned on March 3rd, 2020. And we all know what happened on March 13th, 2020. That was when the country and much of the world went into COVID-19 quarantine lockdown. So at that time, having just had this experience in Thailand and having plenty of free time and a desire to stay away from other people, I started writing a book. So that was 2020, and now it's 2023, and the book is out. So for me, and as from what I gather, speaking with other authors, that's actually not such a long time to go from first word on the page to a book in hand. So.
No, and it's so great that you were so productive during the pandemic, because I've heard from many authors that they just totally shut down and couldn't get a word on the page. So it's great that you actually wrote during that time.
Well, I think not being a writer by profession or an author by avocation. I didn't have it before and after. This was my first attempt. I do tend to be a fairly focused person. So if I set myself a task, I try to, finish it. But I had a huge learning curve in writing this book. But there was so much icky stuff, excuse the language, but there was so much icky stuff going on outside this room is pretty much where I wrote most of the book, that I was happy to stay here in this room and keep my attention focused on this project. So the pandemic had a silver lining for me. I feel very fortunate to have had this project and to have learned so much about writing, about myself, about the whole publishing industry. It's really been a huge learning experience for me.
Well, I do love a reinvention story because I have so many myself, but climate change scientist to kindergarten. You may have bested me. What's the story there?
Well, I was a climate scientist at NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, for more than 30 years. I really enjoyed my work. I feel like I was contributing to an important research topic, to an important societal question, environmental question. But after 30 plus years, I feel like I felt like I had done enough and was able and ready to let other people take over that endeavor. And I wanted to try new things. Many, many years ago, I was a volunteer ESL, English as a Second Language teacher, in DC, teaching immigrants to the Washington area. I did that for a few years, but then I set it aside. But I always remembered that I enjoyed that work. When I retired, I picked up some new activities, one of which was going back to teaching. Now it's called ESOL, English for Speakers of Other Languages. So I became an ESOL teacher, also as a volunteer here in Washington. And I did that for a few years. And actually, I was doing that in retirement, and then my husband retired, and he decided he'd like to try that too. So the two of us were volunteer English teachers at Washington English Center, a wonderful school here in the district that serves the immigrant community. And after a few years, we thought, well, if we can do this in Washington, maybe we could also do it abroad. So we decided to apply for jobs abroad teaching English. And what we really wanted to do was teach grown-ups like we do here. We like teaching grown-ups. They're very well behaved. They're very appreciative. They're very motivated. But as older people, we did not get many job offers. In fact, we got none. The only place where we were able to find a position was Thailand, and the only position we were able to find was teaching kindergarten. And not just kindergarten, but in Thailand, kids start kindergarten at age 2.5. So personally, I would call that preschool. And they call it kindergarten, but I would call it preschool. So thus the story. That's how we ended up in Thailand teaching kindergarten. It really comes out of a desire to teach English abroad. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's quite a story. I mentor and teach ESL here as a volunteer as well, and it's quite difficult to teach people who have absolutely no English. You know, when you're starting from scratch, and people in my little town come from all over the world, and we're trying to teach them English so that they can get jobs and be able to help their families. And a lot of the kids, who are in school need help at home from those parents. And the kids are usually their translators.
Yeah. So Julia, you know what it's like, and you know that feeling when your students start making progress, and when you know that progress makes a huge difference in their life and their ability to manage in a new country. Yeah, so one thing that we did, you're right, it is hard to walk into a classroom and just start teaching. What do you do? Our school does train teachers a little bit, but we also went to get certifications in teaching English to speakers of other languages abroad. So before applying for jobs and before going to Thailand, we did an intensive 1-month training, which helped us develop some sense of confidence in our ability to take the show on the road. But as it turned out, all that I learned about how to teach grammar, how to teach pronunciation, how to do those things, it's pretty much irrelevant when you're speaking about such little children. How do they learn English or any language? They learn it through immersion. And you don't have to teach lessons. You just have to interact. And It's amazing how quickly they progress, of course. So much better than adults.
I think that's so true, and they say the time to learn a new language is when you are very young. And I have 4 adopted grandchildren whose first language is Spanish, and I couldn't speak any Spanish. And with this Southern accent, it was pretty horrific. So I'm glad that they can speak English now.
I think you do better than you say.
Well, once you wrote this book, how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to use a hybrid, a small press, or did you self-publish?
Well, I kind of did a multi-pronged approach to finding a path to publication. Of course, like many authors, my dream was to publish with one of the then big five, now big four, big three, I don't know what, publishing houses. And as you know, that requires having an agent represent your book. So I did go on an agent search. That was an interesting procedure, an interesting path. I didn't stay on that path for very long, however, because a friend of mine who is a children's book author said, she gave me some excellent advice. And she said, Diane, the agent quest can take years, it can take decades. Kind of Don Quixote-like quest for an agent. And once you find an agent, that agent may or may not be able to sell your book. So think about this. Think about, as you pursue an agent, think about also submitting your book to small presses, independent presses. Consider hybrid presses and consider self-publishing because, as you know, Juliet, self-publishing no longer is so much looked down upon as it had been years ago. So I did do some research on all of those things. I mentioned earlier that, going from initial words on the page to published book has been a relatively short period for me. That's because I was extremely lucky. Someone suggested to me that I submit my manuscript to a local independent press called Apprentice House Press. That was, I think, in November of 2021. Their deadline for submissions was just I don't know, December or January, I forget. It wasn't that far away. I did submit my manuscript. It only took them a few weeks to make a decision. In February of that year, actually, I got the word from Apprentice House that they had accepted my book for publication on my birthday. So it was the most wonderful birthday gift I could have wanted. And from then, the process proceeded. So my book will be published by a rather unique well, actually, one shouldn't say rather unique. Something's either unique or it's not. A unique independent press, Apprentice House, which is staffed by students at Loyola University under the supervision of one professor at the university, and they do all the work. The students acquire the books, they edit the books, they design the cover, they design the interior, they even prepare a marketing plan. So I've had the wonderful experience of working with undergraduate students on as the book has made its way from raw manuscript to a book.
Well, that's really very exciting, and what wonderful experiences for these graduate students and for you, undergraduates, because university presses are just very esteemed, and I love the fact that they're using students to do that work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to say, the opportunity to interact and even to meet with them in person, because Loyola University, Maryland is just up the road from me in Baltimore. So I could go up there a few times and sit with them and in the student union and chit chat about the book. It was really wonderful. And from what I hear, that's not terribly common. That for most people that your manuscript's accepted and then it's in someone else's hands. You don't have that much control anymore. So it was lovely. And I think that was one of the really beautiful aspects of this whole process that I'm very grateful for.
Did they offer any publicity for the book, to work with you on publicity?
So as I said, they take a course in book marketing. I think that's the title. In any case, they do work up a publicity and marketing plan for books, but they don't implement that plan. So they leave it to the author to decide how to publicize the book, how to market it. In my case, I felt that since I had no experience in this area, I would work with an outside publicist to help get the word out about the book.
That's very common now for even the big five to expect their authors to do most of their own publicity. So you either have to get a publicist or do it yourself, or both, really, because you're probably implementing a lot of what the publicist wants you to do. I've never written so many essays in my life as when I had a publicist.
Uh-huh.
Have you found anything with your publicist, any publicity that promoted the book well that you think really worked, or maybe something that you tried that didn't work?
Well, Julia, I can't really answer that at this juncture, but I know that this podcast will be airing after the book is released. At this point, we're a month pre-release. We're recording this interview earlier. So what's successful and what's not, I don't know. I'm not even sure if later on, if the book is a huge bestseller, haha, or if it's a flop, whether I will be able to trace that success or lack of success to any particular mistake or excellent work on anybody's part. It seems rather a non-linear relationship between what one does and what outcome there is. And that's true, I think, with the ages search, with the publisher search, the whole world of literature, of literary publishing, to me is so interestingly non-linear. I'll use that term. As we were saying earlier, I come from a science background. I have published a fair bit in scientific literature. It is completely different. I think it's much easier to know whether you've done something well or poorly, and if that's the reason that your work is received well or not. That was a huge adjustment for me, actually, understanding that the world of creative writing is a completely different world from the world of scientific writing.
Well, I can only imagine how you feel about that, because I'm not a scientist and it drives me crazy. So I can only imagine how a scientist would view this publishing industry. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the passage that you've brought to share today, and then read from it so we can hear your tone and voice in the book?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm actually going to read you the first paragraph of the first chapter of the book. And so the book is entitled Kindergarten at 60, A Memoir of Teaching in Thailand. And the first chapter is entitled First Warning Chorus. Our class looks like a pint-sized platoon preparing to march forward to face the day. The children stand, arms distance apart, toes lined up on a seam in the playground's artificial turf, facing their teachers. Each kindergartner is in uniform, blue shirt and plaid shorts or skirt. Each shirt has a child's name embroidered on the right breast, which will make our first day at Pathum Thani Prep a little easier. Some stare, some smile shyly at Steve and me, their new teachers. 11 orderly children in the care of 4 teachers. How hard could this be? Well, the book continues along to tell you how hard it could be. And it turns out to be both full of surprises, full of challenges, and also full of moments of tenderness and joy and learning and dear little children doing dear little things, as well as dear little children doing sometimes very irritating little things. So those were some of the challenges, in addition to the challenges of the language, which was new, the culture, which was different, the heat, which was extreme in Thailand. And that's how the book begins. And I hope that's a little bit of a taste that might whet somebody's appetite to read on.
It really is. And I'm always so amazed by the number of expats that I talk to. And of course, you were on a sabbatical, maybe, instead of completely moving to the country for, permanent residence. But I'm just amazed at all of you who just pick up and go to another country and live. And I'm always so interested in all the details and what life is like there and how you fit in and without knowing the language.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the language was a big hurdle, a big challenge. Thai is spoken only in Thailand. There are, unlike, for example, French, which is spoken in France and many other countries, only Thai people speak Thai. And learning Thai before going to Thailand was not so easy. We thought, oh, we'll maybe take a course or maybe we'll get a tutor. Well, finding that wasn't so hard. It's not a big in-demand language. We did use an audio course, recorded course, and learned some. Thai, however, is a challenging language for an English speaker because it's a tonal language. So you probably know Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese are tonal languages. Thai is yet more tonal in the sense that there are 5 different tones. So a particular sound can be said 5 different ways depending on the tone, and the meaning changes. It's hard for a grown-up to hear that. If you're not trained to hear those tones as a child, your brain isn't really wired to hear that. So making those sounds was hard. The grammar is completely different. There aren't many cognates. Some English words are used in Thai, like in many languages, but not like a Romance language or a Germanic language where there's cognates. Very different. So we were fortunate that we were in a sense, we were fortunate. We were teaching in an English immersion school. So during the school day, we did not need Thai. In fact, the whole purpose was for the children to learn English, and that made our life at school easier. On the other hand, outside of school, not very many people in our part of the world, which was about an hour and a half's drive north of Bangkok, sort of an exurb of the huge capital city, Bangkok. Not many people around there spoke English well. People had a little bit, but not well. So we basically learned how to say things like, where's the toilet? You tell a cab driver where we wanted to go right, go left, go straight. We were able to make greetings. We definitely learned the Thai greeting, Sawadee-ka, which is, you use that a lot. And we learned to say things like, I don't speak Thai. And just saying that you don't speak a language in someone else's language is enough to make them think, you're giving it a little try. They appreciate at least that. At least that was my sense. So yeah, the language was a big hurdle. We did end up teaching adults English, as it turned out. One adult we taught English, and that was another teacher at our school, a Thai teacher, who wanted to teach Thai to tourists, and she needed to improve her English to do that. So we did a little language exchange. We taught her English for an hour, and she taught us Thai for an hour once a week after school. So we had some lessons there, but it was limited. We managed. It's okay. You can manage. Everyone, body language goes a fair distance, you know?
Well, it's just fascinating to me. And I was a teacher. I taught everything from kindergarten to the university level. But I can't imagine teaching in another language for that length of time. So I applaud you.
Well, thank you. I'm sure you could do it, though. English only in the classroom gets you pretty far.
Do you have any other books in you?
I'm not sure. It's a very good question. I feel like it's a possibility. I feel like it's a doable thing now. As I said before, I never imagined that I would write a book, but I see that it's a doable thing. At the moment, I'm kind of still focused on this book, getting it out into the world. I am writing short pieces. This book actually grew out of short essays. It grew out of the messages that we sent home to friends and family while we were in Thailand. Those messages were a big hit. People said to us, oh, I can't wait for your next message. Send us more. They're so funny. They're so charming. Send us more. You should write a book, they said. So that was where the idea came from. So those little essays, those little, nuggets of experience grew into the book. I'm still writing little nuggets of experience. Whether those nuggets will ever turn into a second book or not is to be determined. Author over 50, over 60, maybe I'll be an author over 65 or over 70 someday. We'll see. Yeah.
Well, I'm interviewing people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s, and they're still writing beautiful work. So I think it's something we can do throughout retirement, just like swimming, and you may be able to turn that into another book. I hear from a lot of authors that they begin by journaling, and that's how they take their materials and make it into a book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What does writing success look like to you personally?
Well, there are different ways to define that. I think for me, when you reach that stage when you're working on a piece and you reach that stage where you've gotten your ideas down, you've gotten some feedback, you've revised, you set it aside, you've revised again, you've gotten more feedback, you've revised again, you set it aside for a while, you come back to it, and you revise again. And then you think, well, I could revise some more, but this isn't so bad now after all that. That's a wonderful feeling. And that moment when you feel like, maybe I could submit this now. Maybe it's in good shape. I feel like I've taken out all the extras. I've used language as well as I could, chosen words carefully, chosen images carefully, made the dialogue tight. When you feel happy, I think that's a big milestone. Of course, it's also a lovely milestone when an editor says to you, yeah, we'll publish this. That feels great too. When a reader says to you, I really enjoyed such and such about this story, maybe such and such that you didn't think was such a remarkable part of the story, that feels good too. So all of those little things are moments of satisfaction that I think make the whole writing journey worthwhile. It's not easy. It's lonely. It is revision and revision and revision. But once you accept that it's revision and revision and revision, that's the life. That's well, not for everybody. I'm sure there are people who write beautiful first drafts and their final drafts, and God bless them. That's not me.
Yeah. I haven't met anybody like that. I think they say writing is rewriting. So I think that's the curse for all authors. Mm-hmm. And some people love it. Some people love to get those letters from their editors and get to start rewriting. But for me, it's pretty painful because you have to kill all those darlings.
Yes. But since that term exists, a term, by the way, that I had not heard before I started writing this book and started taking courses and working with writing teachers and in workshops and joining critique groups, but that kill your darlings thing, that has definitely stuck with me, and I just love it. And you can apply that beyond the writing world. That I don't know, you're frosting a cake and it didn't come out so great. Kill that, darling, bake a new one, right? Whatever. But the idea that, not everything you do necessarily is a keepsake. You can set it aside. You don't have to hoard every word that you put on paper.
And you can put those into a file and maybe use them for another book one day. And that always encourages me that I didn't write all of that for naught.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thinking that it wasn't for naught because what came afterwards was better. So kind of the polishing, the getting away the dirt and cleaning things up to make it really sparkle.
Yes. Tightening it up is very helpful and makes the story move more rapidly and lands better with the reader.
Mhm. Yeah, so this book that we're talking about here, Kindergarten at 60, is actually 52 short vignettes. And the first workshop that I took was on writing flash. So, we would be given an assignment, for example, to write about, oh, I don't know what, a confrontation, for example, whatever. We'd all write our little confrontation story, and we'd be given a word count, 1,000 words, whatever. Okay. Can you tell the same story, the teacher would say, in 750? We go back, we write in 750. Can you tell it again in 500? Down, 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 and cutting down to the essence of the story. And I have to say that having that as my first writing workshop was another lucky stroke because, first of all, I realized the value of really choosing your words carefully, cutting all the extra flab. Yeah, killing the darlings, killing the adverbs that aren't necessary, not using passive voice, all the things that make the writing so concise. That was one wonderful gift that was. And then the other thing was just to make me feel that something was finishable. If you're just writing, a 5-page chapter, and that's going to be somewhat self-contained, that's a goal that's achievable, as opposed to writing a novel that goes on chapter after chapter of tens or 20s of pages. So I'm an adherent to the shorter is better mantra. Also recognize that people have a lot to read these days, and sometimes they just want a little bite, a little story that satisfies, without taking too much time to read.
I call that the USA Today attack on literature, where they just give them the details.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that workshop that you took. Are there any specific books or seminars or writing retreats or groups that you took to hone your craft that you can share that improved your writing journey?
Yeah, I'll put in a plug for a place that I love. There's a place here in Bethesda, Maryland called the Writers Center. There probably are similar places elsewhere, but honestly, now, post-pandemic or whatever we call this period, the Writers Center has expanded its programming online. They're accessible to everyone. They offer so many courses, so many workshops, so many programs. I happen to live very close by, and I had never really taken advantage of the Writers Center before, but during the period of writing this book, I did. In fact, just yesterday I was over there. They had an evening gathering of women writers who were looking for community to support their efforts. It's I'll have to say that the Writers Center was sort of the midwife of this book. I may have birthed it, but it couldn't have come into the world without instructors that I met through them, 2 critique groups that I joined that were sponsored by the Writers Center, various social gatherings where I felt, supported by writers with more experience. I could commiserate with writers who were at my level. So yeah, I guess my advice to people would be to seek out community, whatever it may be. I mean, you may have something similar in your neighborhood, or you may be able to find it online, or maybe it's your local library that offers writing workshops, or maybe you can just form a writing group with local other writers who will offer support and critique, honest critique. To me, that was huge. I don't think I would have been able to finish without that kind of support.
Well, that's very high praise. It's wonderful to have a center that close to you that you can take courses and meet with your fellow writers there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a gem, definitely a gem. And as I said, available to people around the world now because of what's happened. Another pandemic silver lining. There aren't too many, but there are a few. And this online stuff is definitely one.
Well, Diane, as always, our last interview question is our writers over 50 are quite unique. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
Um, I think if you're writing and you're 50 and above, you kind of know where you're going. Unlike much younger people, you have life experience, and you know how to manage your time. You know how to set goals. You know how to make good use of the time that we have left on earth, whatever that might be. One thing I might put in another plug for, if you don't mind, Julia, is a journal. This is a journal that was the first journal to ever accept any of my work. I had been submitting some of these flash pieces to various literary journals and getting rejections or getting nothing and getting discouraged and getting depressed. But the first place that accepted a couple of my stories is a journal called Passager, which is an unusual name. It's Passager, but it's devoted to publishing work by older authors. And I forget what their age cutoff is. It may actually be 50, possibly 60, but anyhow, definitely your audience cohort. It's a lovely journal, publishes 2 issues a year, takes submissions from older writers, provides responses, unlike some literary journals. The editors are people in our generational cohort, so you're not being your work isn't being reviewed by an MFA student in his or her 20s who may or may not appreciate your stories. So I'm just going to put in that plug for Passager Journal, Passager.
And that's a great recommendation. And we are just so happy to have you here with us today. You've had such an impact on our world with climate change, and now you've had an impact on small children in Thailand. So I just am anxious to see what you decide to do next. And now we can say that you're one of our authors over 50.
Well, thank you, Julia. It's been a pleasure being on your program. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.